looks. Like a spring crocus.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present Jagmeet Singh, member for the electoral district of Burnaby South, who has made a solemn affirmation, signed the roll, and claims the right to take his seat.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present to you Mr. Jagmeet Singh, member for Burnaby South, who has made a solemn affirmation, signed the roll, and now claims the right to take his seat.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I know I speak for all members when I say that we were all shocked and saddened by news of the terrorist attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. I know that the Prime Minister and I, along with other opposition leaders, will be making statements after question period. But I wanted to give the Prime Minister the opportunity to join with me now, and indeed all members, in expressing our profound sorrow for the victims and their families, while standing in solidarity with Muslims all over the world and condemning the hateful ideologies that promote violence and intolerance.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians across the country were appalled to learn of the terrorist attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. We extend our deepest condolences to the families and friends who lost loved ones in this terrible attack. To the people of New Zealand and Muslim communities in Canada and around the world, you are in our hearts and minds, and we stand with you. I spoke with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern over the weekend to convey Canada's support through this difficult time, both as a government, as political institutions, and also from people to people. I also want to highlight that in regards to the Netherlands, our thoughts are with the residents as we learn more on the possible terrorist attack that they've gone through this morning. We will be reaching out to our counterparts to offer our support.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. The former Attorney General confirmed that the Prime Minister and his staff had a concerted effort to pressure her to put an end to the prosecution of SNC Lavalin. The Prime Minister has now retained a lawyer to defend himself against potential accusations of criminal wrongdoing. When will the Prime Minister allow the Attorney General to speak freely? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Canadians deserve to have trust in their institutions and those who work there. Significant issues have been raised recently about relations between the former Attorney General and Justice Minister and government. And I am announcing today that Anne McClellan will be appointed to investigate independently as former Justice Minister and Attorney General and Deputy Prime Minister. She has a unique understanding of the role
The honourable member for Carleton also will come to order. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Liberals will investigate Liberals to get to the bottom of this situation. Former Liberal Cabinet Minister Anne McClellan. Maybe Sheila Copps wasn't available. Unbelievable, Mr. Speaker. And all for something that, according to the Prime Minister, was completely false. He said none of these accusations were true. But in order to prove that he could do the right thing, let the former Attorney General complete her testimony starting tomorrow at the Justice.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canadians expect and deserve to have faith in the institutions and the people who serve in them. The events of the last few weeks have raised important questions about the relationship between the federal government and the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. I'm therefore announcing that the Honourable Anne McClellan will serve as Special Advisor to examine these questions and provide independent recommendations to us. As former Minister of Justice and Attorney General and Deputy Prime Minister, she is uniquely suited for this role. Her work will be another important step towards maintaining Canadians' confidence in their institutions.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is right. Canadians should have confidence in their institutions, but it's his actions and those around him that have eroded that confidence. Right. Now, remember, on February 7th, the Prime Minister said that all these allegations were completely false. We then saw that 2 ministers resigned on principle. Then his former principal secretary, Gerald Butts, had to resign in disgrace, and today the clerk of the Privy Council had to do the exact same thing. If he wants to restore confidence, he can let the former Attorney General complete her testimony starting tomorrow at the Justice Committee.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've taken responsibility for the erosion of trust between the former Attorney General and my office. That's why it was important that the Justice Committee be able to hear key witnesses in regards to this matter. That's why we put forward an unprecedented waiver of cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege. The committee has been meeting for 5 weeks, and Canadians got to hear all perspectives. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner continues to look into the matter, and I've said from the start, the decisions related to the DPAs were always for the Attorney General and the Attorney General alone to make.
We could have a shorter question period if members don't settle down. The Honourable Member for Carleton better come to order. The Honourable Opposition Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister made a little mistake. It's not the events of the last few weeks that led to the erosion of trust. It was the coordinated, unwanted, and sustained campaign of political pressure on the former Attorney General that eroded trust in institutions under his government. Now, other members have had the ability, other people have had the ability to come back to complete their testimony, but so far the Prime Minister is denying that right to the former Attorney General. She wrote a letter saying that this matter is serious and some questions remain unanswered. She can answer those questions if the Prime Minister lets her. Will he?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government gave an unprecedented waiver for the former minister to speak fully and in detail. Nothing related to this matter was off limits. The waiver covered the former Attorney General's entire term and covers the entire period for which allegations have been made. Since 1987, there have only been 4 similar instances where cabinet confidence was waived, and none of those included solicitor-client privilege. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner continues his important work, and we've appointed the Honourable Anne McClellan as Special Advisor.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by expressing our solidarity for the people of New Zealand who are mourning the attack on Muslim brothers and sisters at the masjid in Christchurch. Mr. Speaker, I met a mom in Burnaby. She bought a home but can't afford to live there anymore. Her daughter has a good job, but only gets by because she lives in the basement. Her son doesn't see a future. Like too many Canadians, he's lost all hope. Yet the Prime Minister is telling families like theirs to wait for help. I believe that better is possible. Will the government commit to building 500,000 new affordable homes?
Hear, hear. Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, allow me to take this occasion to first congratulate and welcome the new member for Burnaby South to this House. I know that he, like every member of this House, will aim to best represent and serve Canadians and his constituents. I hope he and his party will support the work our government has done to lift hundreds of thousands of children across this country out of poverty, to lower taxes for the middle class and raise them on the wealthiest 1%, and indeed to end boil water advisories in so many communities across the country with more to do. These are the things we will continue to work on, and we look forward to his support in creating a better and fairer Canada for everyone.
Honourable member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, 3 budgets and Canadians are still waiting for housing.
Yeah.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, last Friday I was with thousands of young people in the streets condemning the serious lack of leadership by the government around the climate crisis. They say it's time to stop the broken record of half measures and empty rhetoric. Will the Prime Minister put an end to the exemption for big polluters when it comes to the carbon tax? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, after years of inaction by previous governments of all stripes, our government is taking action, concrete steps to combat climate change. We put a price on pollution, Mr. Speaker. We've gone forward with a historic plan to protect our oceans and to protect land areas. We've invested unprecedented amounts in green solutions and innovation for our companies and entrepreneurs. We know that the only way to protect the environment is to support the middle class at the same time, and we will continue doing so. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, polluters and governments concerned about the environment don't buy pipelines. People are concerned about the special access the rich have to the Prime Minister's office. They're concerned about the way the rich manage to get legislation passed secretly. And what's worse, the OECD anti-corruption unit is concerned about possible political interference. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to let us know the truth and launch a public inquiry? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Contrary to the NDP, we will always stand up to protect workers and companies all across the country. We know that people need good jobs in various industries, and we are here to protect them. That's why we're glad to point out that 950,000 new jobs have been created in recent years, and we'll continue working on that. We will always stand up to protect Canadian workers and good jobs in Canada. We'll continue to do so, and we're not going to apologize for defending jobs.
the only job this Prime Minister is concerned about is his own. Mr. Speaker, the OECD's anti-bribery unit is concerned about political interference. And they said this scandal, quote, set all alarms sounding. For Canadians watching at home, this doesn't look any different than when the Conservatives were in power. Nope. Special access for powerful corporations, a closed door for everyone else. Why is this Prime Minister so afraid to launch a public inquiry?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, since our first day in office, we've consistently stood up for Canadians, defended workers, and created good jobs right across the country. Indeed, Canadians have created close to 950,000 good new jobs right across the country over the 3.5 years because this government remains focused on creating opportunities for workers, opportunities for Canadians. We are, of course, going to make sure that we're continuing to maintain the trust and confidence that Canadians have in their institutions, and why we're happy to cooperate with all the various questions, answer all the very questions going on, but we will continue to stand up for jobs.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
On at least 4 separate occasions at the Justice Committee, the former Attorney General said that she couldn't talk about something because of privilege restrictions. She couldn't talk about why she left Cabinet, even though the Prime Minister, Jerry Butts, and the former Clerk of the Privy Council all did. And to add insult to injury, the Liberals on the Justice Committee are clearly nothing more than PMO puppets who are part of this cover-up. The Justice Committee meets tomorrow morning. Will the Prime Minister finally remove all the restrictions and let the former Attorney General speak at the Justice Committee?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, the community has heard from all perspectives. It was this Prime Minister and this government that actually made sure that that Cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege was removed so the former Attorney General could appear. The Opposition House Leader recognizes that the former Attorney General did appear. We know that there was 4 hours of questioning twice. We know that she was able to share her perspectives. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, these conversations took place in public so that Canadians could also be able to hear what takes place. That member should know how committees operate, but it's unfortunate that the Conservatives have no regard for committees. Thank you.
Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear to everyone watching that the Justice Committee is controlled by the Prime Minister's office through the Liberal members on that committee. And today we've just heard that the Prime Minister is going to be asking his Liberal friend, Anne McClellan, to apparently investigate. I guess his Liberal friends Jerry Butts, Kathleen Wynne, and Sheila Copps were busy. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? We don't need any Liberals investigating Liberals. What we need to have is the former Attorney General allowed to speak and to give her whole story. So will the Prime Minister let her speak?
Honourable Government House Leader.
On this side, we'll focus on the facts. The government gave unprecedented waiver for former Minister to speak fully and in detail. And the waiver covers the former Attorney General's entire term. It covers the whole period during which allegations have been made. Mr. Speaker, the committee is doing its important work. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is doing their work. We know that there's 2 ongoing investigations. I'm not surprised that the Conservatives would play their traditional games of smearing names. Maybe we should reach out to Jay Hill and find out how to undermine the work of committees. That was the Conservative way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, on the scandal involving the Prime Minister and SNC Lavalin, all Canadians know they haven't been given the full picture. In a letter to her constituents, the former Attorney General said, quote, "These matters are still unfolding and further clarity and information is needed. And because this matter is serious and some questions remain unanswered," unquote. So will the Prime Minister let her speak tomorrow at the Standing Committee on Justice, yes or no? The Honourable Government House Leader. We have confidence in the members sitting on the Justice Committee. We know that they will do their work, and they must. The government waived solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence, and that was unprecedented between 1867 and now. This has only happened 4 times, and no, there has never been any waiver of solicitor-client privilege. But we know that Canadians are entitled to know what happened, and that is why the Attorney General did testify. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, we know that the Attorney General was able to speak until January 14th, but between then and February, there was a time when the Attorney General should have been allowed to speak. Will the Prime Minister allow the Justice Committee to hear from the Attorney General again? The Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, members sitting on the Justice Committee will do their job and make their own decisions. The committee has heard all perspectives and everything was done in public. The former minister appeared for almost 4 hours. Cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege were lifted so that she could share all her knowledge with the committee. We know that the Justice Committee and the members of that committee will do their work. We have confidence that they are able to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the minister expects us to have confidence in the Justice Committee that shuts down debate 20 minutes into a meeting before a motion can even be debated. And now they're throwing up the smokescreen of Anne McClellan. Anne McClellan served in cabinet with the Minister of Public Safety, with the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, with the Minister of Veterans Affairs. She was a minister during the Liberal sponsorship scandal, and that's going to make this go away. Why doesn't the Prime Minister lift the gag order tomorrow at the Justice Committee? Let the former Attorney General speak.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, what is clear that we have regard and respect for the work that committees do. We have...
Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side, we have regard and respect for the work that committees do. We have respect for officers of Parliament. We know that the Commissioner of Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is actually looking into this matter. We know that there are 2 ongoing court cases. What we just heard from the member opposite is clear that they will continue to undermine our institutions. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General appeared at committee. Something she said was that Canadians can have confidence in their institutions and that the rule of law was followed. Thank you, Mr.
For Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, it is these Liberals that are eroding Canadians' confidence in their institutions. And Anne McClellan isn't an institution. She's a former Liberal minister that was there during the sponsorship scandal. The former Attorney General has made it clear that she has more to say. The Prime Minister is standing in her way, blocking her from completing her testimony. So will he stop being so afraid of what she has to say, remove the gag order, let her speak? Let her speak!
Honourable Government House Leader.
As I've said, this government took an unprecedented waiver for the former minister to speak fully and in detail. This Prime Minister, this government, we waived solicitor-client privilege as well as cabinet confidence. Since 1987, there's only been 4 times that has happened. None included solicitor-client privilege. One of those times was under Stephen Harper, and it's interesting that that member now talks about how committees operate. It's clear that he's projecting because he knows that Stephen Harper used to tell them what to do. We on this side, we have confidence in our members that sit on the Justice Committee. We know that they can do their work fully independently of this place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Last week at the Justice Committee emergency meeting, Liberal MPs shut down debate on the PMO's interference scandal. Tomorrow, Liberals intend to hold the meeting out of the public eye behind closed doors. They keep telling Canadians there's nothing to see here. It's just procedural. The fact is the former AG wants to tell her whole truth, but the Prime Minister refuses to let Canadians hear it. This is a deliberate obstruction of justice. Canadians deserve the truth. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and allow the former AG to speak her whole truth for Canadians to hear? Yes or no?
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been clear on every occasion that the decision that is being discussed was for the former Attorney General to take. It is clear that the decision that the former Attorney General took remains in place. We also know on this side that committees can do their important work. We see that the NDP now have the same talking points as the Conservatives, and they look for direction from their leader as to what to do at committee and what not to do. That is not the approach of this side. This Prime Minister, this government respects the work of members that sit on the committee. We will let them do their important work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay. Order.
Prime Minister's attempt to interfere with the SNC bribery case has cost him his former Attorney General, the President of the Treasury Board, the Clerk of the Privy Council, so he's going to bring a Liberal back from the sponsorship days to make it all right. Who's coming up with these ideas? No wonder the OECD anti-bribery unit said this is, quote, set all the alarms ringing. Well, I'll say this is like a 5-alarm dumpster fire of political cronyism, incompetence, and now obstruction. What is the Prime Minister so afraid of that he will not let the former Attorney General speak her truth so Canadians can get to the bottom of this very tawdry scandal?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, I do actually want to start by thanking Mr. Wernick for his decades of service to this country. 37 years of service to this country. We know that when it comes to our public service, we have the best public servants in the whole wide world, and they serve our country. That member might choose to use name calling and whatever approach. We know that the Justice Committee can do their work. We know that officers of Parliament should be able to do their work. We know that we believe and support the independence of the judicial system. We will focus on Canadians while they focus on tactics.
The
honourable member for Beauport, Côte de Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. There is still no answer about the SNC Lavalin scandal, and it's high time Canadians knew the whole truth. The former Attorney General wants to tell the whole truth and reiterated that in her letter of March 14th, which reads, "Recent events have been a wake-up call for many across this country. Further clarity and information is needed." Will the Liberal members on the Justice Committee backtrack and let her speak tomorrow morning? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we know that the government waived cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege to allow the minister to speak freely. Members on the Justice Committee are doing their job. They're asking questions. And we know that the former AG was there for 4 hours and answered many questions. And the same questions were being asked over and over again, and they're getting the same answers. But the member obviously read the question that the opposition leader gave her. Because she can't ask her own questions, she has to follow her leader's instructions.
Order. The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General says the SNC scandal is a serious wake-up call, and the OECD says all alarms are sounding. This is serious. Canadians and our allies must be reassured that our rule of law is intact. We need the whole truth, not just the pieces the Prime Minister will allow us to hear. Tomorrow, Liberal members will determine the future of the investigation. Will the Prime Minister let the former Attorney General speak tomorrow at the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Exactly as that member has asked, I would like to reassure Canadians and international partners that the rule of law is intact in Canada. I would like to reassure Canadians that they can have trust and faith in our democratic institutions. It's the Justice Committee that is doing their important work, and they continue to do so. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is studying this matter, and we know that they will do their important work. We know that there's 2 ongoing investigations, court cases. We know that we can have confidence in the independence of our judicial system. Mr. Speaker, we have confidence, and Canadians can too. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A member for Battleford, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, well, we know Canadians would have more confidence in our system if the Prime Minister would just let the former Attorney General speak. The SNC Lavalin scandal has yet again shined a light on this government's ethical failures. The former Attorney General's testimony detailed grossly inappropriate actions taken by the Prime Minister and his inner circle. But this wasn't even her full story. The Prime Minister continues to refuse to let her speak fully and freely. Canadians deserve to hear the rest of her story. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, will he allow Liberal members on the Justice Committee to let her speak?
Hear, hear. Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, I'll try this again. There are members of Parliament from both sides that sit on committees. When it comes to our members, they make their decisions and they know how to proceed. What they do know is that members have been appearing. It was actually this Prime Minister, this government, that waived solicitor-client privilege as well as cabinet confidence to ensure that the former Attorney General and Minister of Justice could appear at committee and be able to share what she needed to share. We know that she was there for over 4 hours. We know that the questions got asked. She was able able to answer them, and we also know that the questions were quite repetitive.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
Imagine that. She was there for about 4.5 hours. She was allowed to speak. And yet she told us and all Canadians that she has more to say, that her testimony has not been made complete. So, Mr. Speaker, our question is very simple, and that is, Canadians want a full story. They want to understand the full picture here. They don't see why this government is shutting down the Justice Committee and not allowing the former Attorney General to speak. Parliament belongs to Canadians. They deserve answers. So here's our question. Will the Prime Minister end the cover-up and let her speak?
Full Government House Leader.
Again, we have confidence in the work that members of Parliament that sit on the Justice Committee will do. We know that they're capable of it. We know that the Prime Minister has taken responsibility for the breakdown of trust and communication within his office. We know that he is committed to finding a better way forward, because that's exactly what it is. When it comes to the Conservatives, it's interesting. They talk about what do Canadians want. Mr. Speaker, Canadians want an economy that works for them so that they can work and be able to contribute. Canadians want a clean, greener future for their kids and grandkids. That's what we're delivering. But the Conservatives continue to have no plan and play their tactics.
Order. Honourable.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Well, speaking about plans, Mr. Speaker, more than 130,000 students in Quebec went on strike for the climate last Friday. They're demanding that governments take strong action to limit climate warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. They're sounding the alarm because the government is getting further and further away from its own GHG emissions every year. Will the Prime Minister stop subsidizing the gas and oil industry? Will he show political courage and bring forward measures to reduce pollution, invest in green energy, or will students have to jeopardize their own education so that their message is heard? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
For the question, I'd like to congratulate all the young people who marched across Canada and around the world to support climate action just last week. Mr. Speaker, the irony is not lost on me that while students were striking for climate action, the Ford government in Ontario was actually touring university campuses to fight action on climate change. The answer to the member's question, we are taking action to reduce emissions. We're putting a price on pollution that's going to make life more affordable and bring emissions down. We're making our electricity going to be 90% clean by 2030, and we're making the largest investment in Canada's history in public transit. These are real measures that are going to impact climate change. They are going to make a difference for Canadians for generations.
Member for Vancouver East.
Country agreement wasn't working over a year ago. The U.S. isn't a safe country for asylum seekers. Children continue to be separated from their parents. Gender-based violence is no longer recognized as a basis for asylum. The Prime Minister stated that the treatment of asylum seekers by the U.S. was wrong, but instead of suspending the agreement, the Liberals are looking to expand it and apply it to those crossing into Canada irregularly. Is this what a Liberal feminist government looks like? Denying women fleeing domestic violence the right to make an asylum claim.
Honourable Minister of Border Security.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada and the United States have the most secure and efficient border in the world, and the Safe Third Country Agreement remains an important tool for us to continue to work together on an orderly processing of asylum claims made in both of our countries. We know that this agreement can be improved, and I have personally met with members of the U.S. Congress, Border Protection agencies, and Department of Homeland Security because we believe there are opportunities to improve this agreement to the mutual benefit of both countries and our citizens.
Honourable Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in 2017, we extended our military training mission in Ukraine, Operation Unifier, until 2019. Since then, 200 Canadian Armed Forces members have trained close to 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and Canada has been advising the country on NATO standard defense reforms. Can the Minister of National Defense update the House on how our government is standing shoulder to shoulder in Ukraine in the face of Russian military aggressions?
Honourable Minister.
I want to thank the member from Etobicoke Centre for his tireless advocacy for the people of Ukraine. He knows our government's support to Ukraine is unwavering. Today we announced the renewal of our military training and cooperation mission in Ukraine for an additional 3 years until March 2022. This mission is a key part of Canada's whole-of-government approach to support Ukraine. We want a strong, stable, and sovereign Ukraine, and we are helping Ukrainians achieve that goal. Mr. Speaker, we stand with the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, 6 weeks ago, the Prime Minister denied he attempted to interfere in a criminal trial. His excuses have evolved as evidence of political interference accumulated, despite sycophantic stonewalling by Liberal members of the Justice Committee. Now the PM and senior staffers have lawyered up on the public dime in apparent anticipation of criminal investigation and possible prosecution. We're looking at unvarnished corruption here, Mr. Speaker. Will the PM direct Liberal MPs to stop the cover-up at Justice tomorrow?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the Conservative Party cannot understand that when it comes to members that sit on committees, that they are capable of making their own decisions. Members that sit on the Justice Committee know that this file has been with the Justice Committee for 5 weeks, and they have been able to hear from all perspectives. Members also know that they've been able to ask questions, witnesses have appeared and answered those questions. When it comes to the former Attorney General, we know that the Prime Minister waived solicitor-client privilege. We know that he waived cabinet confidence. That's something that was unheard of under the Conservatives.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Order, please. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's SNC Lavalin saga is turning into an unprecedented corruption scandal in Canada. A Prime Minister who rejects his own country's Attorney General's ruling and refuses to allow any explanation. Mr. Speaker, we now know the Prime Minister even gave independent lawyers the mandate to prepare his own defense. Why is the Prime Minister organizing his own defense and continue to hide the truth from Canadians? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the members who sit on the Justice Committee have taken the time to hear witnesses who came before the committee and answered questions. For 5 weeks now, the Justice Committee members have been working on this file. We also know that the Ethics Commissioner is continuing his examination of the issue. We respect the work that goes on in these offices, and we know that the committee can do its work.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has had a stellar reputation as a founding member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Sadly, under this Liberal government, that reputation is being tarnished by the Prime Minister's conduct in the SNC Lavalin affair, as the OECD bribery group is now investigating the Liberal government's actions. When will the Prime Minister recognize that Liberal corruption and stonewalling is harming Canada's international reputation?
The House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that that member recognize that when it comes to the rule of law in Canada, it is intact and it is being followed. We also know that in Canada, we have institutions, offices of Parliament that are able to do their work. We know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter. We have confidence that they are able to do that important work, something that the Conservatives didn't understand for 10 years, and it's clear that they don't seem to comprehend that now. We know that there is an ongoing court case. We will let the independence of the judicial system do their important work because we know that they should. Thank you.
Member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Foreign Affairs Minister. In her formal response to the OECD, the minister pledged to update them on, quote, independent domestic process currently underway in Canada, end quote, on the SNC affair. How can she claim that the SNC investigation is independent when Liberal MPs are preventing the former Attorney General from testifying? The minister loves to talk about the international rules-based order, so will she live up to her own rhetoric and allow the former Attorney General to testify tomorrow at the Justice Committee?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I do indeed love to talk about the international rules-based order because that is absolutely essential for the defense of the Canadian national interest in the world. When it comes to the OECD, Canada is proud of our participation in this important organization, and we have been clear from the start with the OECD that we support their work and we will cooperate with it fully.
The honourable member for Durham. Oh, sorry, Longueuil Saint-Hubert.
The honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that our media are experiencing an unprecedented crisis. Last year, the government promised a tax credit to support journalism. There were many announcements, but since then, radio silence. The government put out a few press releases, but no money. Rumor has it the government could be putting all this off until after the elections. Facebook and Google don't have any trouble in getting an audience with the Prime Minister or a big tax break. But over here, their media collapsing and thousands of jobs at stake. How many more years will they have to wait?
The Minister of Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, the Broadcasting Act hasn't been reviewed since before the internet was in our homes. And why is that? That's because for 10 years, the Conservatives took no action on this. We've appointed a panel of experts to help modernize this act. Our starting point is clear. All players who participate in this system will pay. There will be no free rides, and I know that my colleague, the Minister of Finance, is working with our allied countries to find a consensual approach to this issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Member for North Island Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, due to a glitch in CPP payments that started in 2009, 10 years, both Conservative and Liberal governments overpaid seniors, and now they're telling these seniors, you gotta pay it back. Seniors might have even been unaware of the overpayment, and it could also mean that they paid higher taxes. Paying these amounts back will impact seniors, the most vulnerable seniors that are on or below the poverty line in this country. So can this government please explain to the people of Canada what they're going to do to make sure that seniors aren't overburdened with paperwork and the most vulnerable are not paying with so little resources?
The honourable member of Social Development.
Speaker, our agenda on helping middle-class Canadians has started with helping seniors. Right in budget in 2016, we introduced an enhancement to the guaranteed income supplement, which is helping 75,000 seniors to be lifted out of poverty. We've also introduced an enhancement to the Canada Pension Plan, a historic enhancement which we hadn't seen for many decades. And we're going to be working very hard to make sure that all vulnerable seniors receive the benefits to which they are entitled.
Honourable member for Carleton.
So now the Prime Minister is bringing in a politician from the era of the Liberal ad scam to investigate today's Liberal lav scam. But Emma Cullen's just a little bit busy right now, Mr. Speaker. In fact, on March 31st, you can go meet with her if you donate to the Liberal Party and attend a fundraiser. I guess that's where they will discuss this independent investigation. I've got a better idea. Tomorrow, the Justice Committee will meet in the morning to decide on whether to bring back the former Attorney General to complete her testimony. Will the Prime Minister let her speak?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Committees in which parliamentarians, members of parliament sit. That committee is the Justice Committee that the member refers to. They are doing their important work, and we do believe that they should be able to. It was this Prime Minister.
Order. It's important we hear members when they're speaking in the House, and whether it's asking a question or giving the answer, even if we don't like what someone may be saying. I think members respect that. Don't recognize the importance of that. I would hope so in our democracy. The Honourable Government House Leader has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, it's always quite interesting is that when I do get up to answer that the Conservatives don't let me speak, but it's fascinating how they want people to be able to speak when it seems to be a political game. That is not how we operate on this side of the chamber, Mr. Speaker. We have confidence in the Justice Committee. They will do their important work. We know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is also doing their important work. We believe they should be able to. Thank you.
Order. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
So the Prime Minister's top advisor has resigned. His Attorney General has resigned. His Treasury Board President has resigned. And now the head of the entire public service has resigned. No one did anything wrong, but everybody's resigning for it. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know something happened here. Something bad enough that the Attorney General could no longer be part of the government at all. But she hasn't been allowed to tell us why. Will the Prime Minister join with us tomorrow morning at the Justice Committee to let her speak?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the Conservatives have never let the facts get in the way, but it's important that Canadians be reminded of them. It was actually this Prime Minister and the government that waived solicitor-client privilege and waived cabinet confidence so that the former Attorney General could appear. It was Justice Committee members that asked the Clerk appear, asked the former Attorney General to appear, asked for other witnesses to appear. Those people have been appearing. We also know that the Justice Committee has been now sitting for 5 weeks. We know that the former Attorney General appeared for over 4 hours, answered a series of questions, by which the end were quite repetitive. Thank you.
Member for Carleton.
Yes, you did appear, and the Conservative Deputy Leader asked her this. Can you tell us why you resigned from Cabinet? Answer, I cannot. And the reason is because the Prime Minister kept in a gag order for the period after he moved her out of the position of Attorney General. And during that period, she witnessed events so egregious, she thought it merited her resignation from Cabinet altogether. If the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, tomorrow morning he will show up at the Justice Committee and have his members vote in favor of letting her speak. Will he?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, if that member was more concerned about actually seeing what's taking place at committee instead of worrying about sound outs, maybe he would see that the committee has actually been doing their important work. They've been studying this matter for over 5 weeks, Mr. Speaker. There's been a series of witnesses that have appeared. We have confidence that the committee can do their important work. Mr. Speaker, additionally, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter. We believe that officers of Parliament are independent of this place and should be able to do this work. We also know that there's an ongoing court case. We believe in the independence of the judiciary. We will not undermine them like the Conservatives continue to do.
Order. The Honourable Member, order. Yvonne Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, this week marks a great step forward for greater gender equality at home and in the workplace with the introduction of the new parental sharing benefit. With
the work of raising their children more equally. Le ministre de la Famille.
Can the Minister of Children, Families, Children and Social Development tell the House more about the new parental sharing benefit? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Vaughan Woodbridge for his excellent work and for his question. I'd also like to recall that our government understands that gender equality is good for Canadians and it's good for the economy.
Parental sharing benefit, which is giving parents 5 more weeks to spend with their children. And that's why with investments in early learning and childcare, with investments in the historic Canada Child Benefit, we're giving more money to parents to spend on their children and more time for them to spend with their children.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, where there is smoke, there is fire. Clearly things are smouldering in the Prime Minister's office. So much so that the firefighters have been called in. We learned this weekend that the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet connected to Operation Camouflage in the former General Attorney affair have hired lawyers. Rather than waste Canadians' money, will the Prime Minister come clean? Did the RCMP communicate with him or with his office about this political interference in SNC's criminal trial? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, economic development, lower GHG emissions, the benefits of a high-frequency train project are well known. Last year, on this same date, the Minister of Transport promised a response within the year, but to this date, nothing. Obviously, the HFT will be at the most an election promise, but not an achievement. If the Minister of Infrastructure is able to announce $1 billion for light rail in Edmonton, how is it that the Minister of Transportation is unable to do anything for the most populated corridor in the country, the Honourable Minister of Transport? Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows full well, we are at the study stage of this project that was proposed by the Via Rail. It's a large-scale project for the corridor between Quebec City and Windsor. It's a very important project, but we have to do our due diligence. We're doing that, and once we have something to say about it, we will say it to him. The Honourable Member for Lanty-de-Libel. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that our minerals and metals industry is important to our economy and to communities across the country, which is why our government is working hard to ensure that the industry remains a source of jobs and economic growth. Can the minister update this House on how our government is focusing on innovation, the development of clean technologies, and strengthening the regulatory process to ensure a prosperous, resilient, and sustainable exploration and mining sector? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister.
I like the member from Lavalin for his important question and for his hard work. Our government is supporting the mineral sector by extending the mineral exploration tax credit for 5 years, by investing in the innovation, and by fixing the broken review process for mines and other major projects. And now, our new Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan will ensure this sector continues to create good middle-class jobs for generations to come.
The Honourable Member for York Simcoe.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister refuses to come clean about his interference in the criminal prosecution of SNC Lavalin. He is choosing instead to cover it up at every opportunity. It is clear that the Prime Minister interfered in a criminal trial to defend his friends, and now he has hired lawyers to defend himself. Can the Prime Minister confirm if he or his staff has been contacted by the RCMP?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Pierre-Boucher-Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow will be the last budget before the elections, the last opportunity for Liberals to have an opportunity to be forgiven for every time they've betrayed Quebec. That is, wasting our money on dirty energy, cutting healthcare transfers, and letting our regions down. It's a very long list, especially for our dairy producers who were betrayed 3 times under free trade agreements. This is their last chance. Will the government finally and fully compensate our producers for those 3 attacks on supply management? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government has stood up for the supply management system when the Americans wanted to see it dismantled. We're currently working with many working groups, producers, processors, dairy producers, so that we can find the best way to fully and fairly support them. We will also make sure that there is a vision for the future so that they are prosperous for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'Honorable Député de Beauce.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. We learned that the government is speaking to the Americans to close loopholes in the third country safe agreement. Under those loopholes, illegal immigrants have been allowed to cross borders and have involved expenditures of hundreds of millions of dollars. Nothing has been resolved. Why has this government allowed the situation to deteriorate, and why did they let it get to this point before they sat down with the Americans to make sure our borders were respected?
Speaker, let me be very clear that people who come to Canada seeking our protection, overwhelmingly families and children, when they enter the country, regardless of how they enter, if they make a claim for asylum, they are entitled under Canadian law to a fair hearing, due process, and our protection until the determination of their eligibility is made. We've been working very closely with our counterparts in the United States to ensure that the bilateral agreement that exists between us operates fairly and efficiently to encourage people to cross at regular points of entry to maintain the security and the integrity of our border. We will continue with that important work.
The member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Friday, more than 150,000 students marched in Montreal.
Almost every town and city in Canada, students saying you're stealing our future. We want to take it back. One sign in Victoria where hundreds and hundreds of kids were marching said, "The kids are the only adults in the room." When will this government get rid of the Harper target to extinction and bring in place a target that takes us to survival?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, climate change is real and the cost of inaction is enormous. To the young Canadians who marched on Friday, we hear you. We are taking action to put a price on pollution, to phase out coal, and to keep our oceans and communities clean. Unlike the Conservatives who want to make pollution free again and have no plan for the environment, our government has a serious plan to fight climate change. Our plan will create a cleaner, more prosperous future for our kids and our grandkids.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Finance Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with the sad memory of the terrorist attacks in my home province, I would like
1. Condemns the terrorist attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. 2. Extends its deepest condolences to the families and friends who lost loved ones. 3. Expresses solidarity with the people of New Zealand and Muslim communities in Canada and around the world. 4. Affirms the need to confront hatred, Islamophobia, and white supremacy in all their forms. And 5. Commits to working to create a world where all people, no matter their faith, can feel supported and safe. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Does the Parliamentary Secretary have unanimous consent? Agreed. The House has heard the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried.
Tabling of documents.